Hey friends, welcome to class 3 of the Crease Pattern series. And here today we have some interesting structures for you guys. So it's not going to be a whole lot, but these transition units are a little bit special. So in the last class, we went over level shifters, and that's where we would shift our box plate level from one unit up one unit. That way we could get things like pleats for beetles and whatnot. And now this is a very similar concept, but it's the reverse. These are transition units down, and I kind of call them downshifters. That's not the official term, but they're also used for pleats that you might be familiar with, such as reussion scales, or the body segments for beetles, as we have here. And yeah, so we're going to cover those today. There's a couple different types, and I'll kind of inform you on how to recognize those two different types. So here are the two transition units that we're looking at. And while you might see some similarities with them, there's kind of a main difference that at least I tend to point out with these. And this is the more common reussion type pleat, versus this is more of something you'd find in an insect. And kind of my main distinction between the two of these, which I'll go into further detail when I explain each one, is that generally this set of pleats you want to do first, just as if you would do a level shifter, and these you would do fully last, so after you collapse the entire model. And I'll get into the details why. So this is the transitions that we're going to do in this video, and it's actually a part of a model designed by Damian Malicki, and that is his Sun Beetle. It's one of his newer models, and it is going to be kind of our goal target model for this part of the box plate crease pattern class. So this crease pattern is the crease pattern for the Sun Beetle, and as you might be able to recognize some of the structures we've gone over, like level shifters, the Pythagoras stretch. And this is kind of like the culmination of everything we've learned. So we still have to cover some things about color change units, or just how to collapse those, which will come in a later video. This is just a test fold, but this model is actually a color change model. So we'll get into that. And today specifically, this transition unit is these pleats on the back of the Beetle. All right, so these pleats, as I mentioned, you do after you collapse the full model. So in the example of the Beetle, I collapsed everything on the Beetle first, and then I was able to do the pleats after. Now you might be wondering how that's possible. By itself already, it kind of looks kind of scary, because there's units that are on the what would be 64th division grid, in this case to be 32. That would be extremely annoying to precrease, especially when it's that small. But the great thing is you don't need to precrease it. Now you can by all means precrease it. So this is an example. If you did precrease it, it'd lie all flat, but that kind of makes it a little bit more difficult. That's kind of like just pushing through and brute forcing this collapse. But as I've gathered information from other designers, including Damian himself, I've come to the conclusion that the much simpler method, which can be the more elegant method, is what we're going to do with this today. So now we go on to precreasing. Now in general, this transition unit, you might remember this a little bit from the facehugger tail that I showed earlier. It's pretty much the same method, just a little bit more refined with this design. But yeah, so when you print this out for yourself, if you're following along, what you want to precrease is obviously the Elias stretch lines, as well as the grid, of course. And then instead of precreasing these half units, all you need to do is go 2 units down, 1 across, 2 units down, 1 across, and then this last one here. Even though the crease isn't on the crease pattern, if you can recognize the sequence you're going to do or the structure, then as if this were in a diagram, the crease would be there. So don't be afraid if you recognize that, oh, I'm going to have a crease there, just it's okay. It's not going to show. But yeah, so go ahead and pre-crease. I'm going to pre-crease this really quick and we'll get to collapsing it. All right, so here we are. Everything is now pre-creased and the grid is folded, so it's ready to be collapsed. And what I want you guys to pay attention to is the crease lines that I did here, just as I mentioned before, and I didn't pre-crease any of the half units at all. So yeah, you don't need those. It'll save you a lot of time. You don't need it at all, and potentially, if this paper is really small, it'll make it more precise. Yeah, so let's get to collapsing. This should be a pretty general collapse now that these are creased in. So I'm gonna collapse it for you and then show it. It's gonna be very similar to the face hugger if you've done that. There's nothing's too weird here. But yeah, we'll be right back. Hey friends, so before we continue, I just want to clarify something really quick. What I'm about to show and also the pre-creasing I showed from this scene is in order to kind of make it more simple to the crease pattern that you guys can follow along with. So basically what's going on is here is the crease pattern, right? And I thought it'd be easier to show it using the pre-existing creases, which basically is like this, right? And I removed the pleat transitions just to make it easier to see. However, for this specific transition and the sequence I show, the actual crease pattern looks something a little bit more like this. And you'll see why this kind of makes more sense than here, because we're going to squash fold along this flap and this flap versus the flaps created here. Just want to show that for you guys. So in case you want to skip the more elegant area and just go straight crease pattern, this is the one you would want to do. But yeah, let's get back to the video. All right, so now this is all collapsed and it should look something like this. And you can see that we didn't fold along those half marks. I showed the time lapse of me folding this just so you guys can kind of see, in case it was a little confusing, just because the crease pattern doesn't have those creases. So that's what it looks like on the inside. And it looks like the pleats from the tail of Donnie's face hugger. Now the sequence we're going to use to get this pleated, it's a little bit different, but it's pretty much the same. And it's going to follow actually a very similar path to what we're going to do in the next part. So yeah, let's get started. All right, so we're going to work with this top, I guess on top pleat first. And the first thing we want to do is actually reverse this valley fold. So as you can see right now, this pleat flap is like this. We're actually going to want to invert it. So hold up like this so that it becomes a flap on its own, kind of like this. And on the inside here, it's just going to change the creases up a little bit. But don't worry too much of it. It should be nice, easily flat folding. So if you feel any resistance, then just swap that around. And then we're going to do the same thing on the flap below. And now doing this, you might not always have to do this on these kinds of pleats. It really depends what the crease pattern is like. But for this one, since the pleats are like this, you can do it this way. When I did this on Beetle, I actually didn't do this and it worked similarly. But if you just want to keep everything the same as the crease pattern, then you're gonna want to do this. So let's get this going. And pretty much all this difference is going on here is a swap of mountain folds in the crease pattern. So just like this. Cool, now we're ready to work. All right, so now what do you do next? This you've seen before, and the technique I want to say was invented by Issei Yoshino, and Kamiya Satoshi uses this kind of as well. Not exactly this unit, but this kind of sequence. So we have our folds here, and basically all we're going to want to start off with is folding these in half with the valley fold. Now if you're using A4 like I am, this might be a little thick, but I think we'll be all right. So just like that, and you want to try to make this as precise as possible as you're folding through a couple layers. The next step we're going to do is unfold that, and we're going to squash fold this flap. So you're going to come here, and we're going to squash fold it. So if you need to practice your squash folding, this is a good time to practice that. Although this squash fold isn't that hard, you just want to make sure that you're really precise, so don't rush it. As you can see, I'm definitely taking my time. And if it makes it easier, that one crease you have to reverse, I kind of open up the model to get that working. There you go. And then squash fold it down. And now if you were doing this crease pattern without the mountain valley lines, you would just go along that crease you just made. So here, just like this. Perfect. And now we're actually almost done with this unit. Last thing we're going to do is, again, this you just want to check with your crease pattern. And if you can see, we've successfully completed this mountain valley sequence right here. So on yours, you can check that out. But this one is inverted. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to fold up along this flap like so. And then we're going to sink fold this little flap in. And I know sinks are scary, but this is a pretty easy sink. All you really gotta do is push it under, and since it's box, it'll go in pretty easily. And it's not too much of a real sink. The only sinky part will happen below, so just kind of, if anything, just reverse the pleat and try to get it as precise as possible. And you'll see that we successfully are folding along our crease pattern lines. And if you get some paper creep on the bottom, just try to fix that. Like that. And keep those pleats nice and precise. Pleats look best when they're precise. All right, so now we're gonna do the same thing on this top flap, just to reiterate. So you're gonna fold in half. I'm gonna do it this way again, just like this. Like this, and then make sure that crease is strong. And then you're going to unfold it like this. And then we're going to squash fold it. And to make things a little faster, I'm just going to open up the model just a little bit to help me with that squash. Like this. So now we have our squash fold. And then just check your crease pattern to see which way the pleats go. Although if you've done one already, it should be pretty apparent. I'm gonna fold that flap back like this. You guys can see. And then we're going to sink this in, /sink in quotes, because it's not gonna seem like a traditional sink. I guess it's kind of a closed sink, but it's not even really a closed sink. You're kind of just inverting the pleats like that. And we have it complete. So that's all that's to it. Again, it's not that bad. And looking at the crease pattern, it can look scary. Looking at all the pre-creasing, that's honestly probably would be the worst part of it. But in actuality, it's quite simple. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. In the next part of this class of class 3, we'll go over the next transition unit. But once again, the whole goal is so that eventually you guys will be able to solve this crease pattern, which will probably be the most complex crease pattern you'll have done compared to the other simple ones we've done already. So yeah, thanks for watching this class and get ready for part 2.
All this origami, all this origami, all this origami got me going kamikaze now.